You are live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So are we live on Facebook? It's not popping up, Mark. Oh, there we are. Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Betsy McKeown, and I'm an engineer and project manager in the City of Annapolis's Public Works Department. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us, and I want to introduce the team. We have obviously myself, Sam Bryce, who is the Bureau Chief in Public Works, is joining us. We have Beth Bellis, is the Harbor Master, and Tyler Northfield, who is the Deputy Harbor Master. We have, let's see, Wakar Chima from Jamaica and Scott Milkey from Waterfront Engineering. And we also have Amy Clements from the Spa Creek Conservancy. And we also have Mark Hildebrand from our IT department helping us out. And I also see Alderwoman Tierney has joined us. So welcome, Alderwoman Tierney. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. Did I miss any other panelists? Okay. So our main objective this evening is to present to you the work that we've done so far. We've gotten to the point where we've developed a concept design, and we'd like to hear from you on our concept before we move forward with progressing through design into 65% design. The way it's going to work tonight is I'm going to hand it over to the design team to do the presentation, and then we'll open it up to everybody to ask questions, and we'll try to answer your questions to the best of our ability. We are currently live streaming on Facebook Live, so I will be trying to multitask and answering any of the questions that pop up on Facebook Live as well. So at the end of the presentation, when we bring you forward as a panelist, if you can just physically raise your hand, and we will address you to ask your question, and then you can unmute yourself at that time. Additionally, you can also submit any questions and comments after the meeting to me at my email address, which will be on the last slide. And I'd like to request that you submit everything to us by April 14th. We have to have a hard stop at 7:30. Our presentation is very brief. It's only 10 slides. So we should be able to get through the presentation very quickly, and then we'll mostly have a question and answer. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Wakar to start the presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Wakar Chima here. We are here for a committee meeting for Bulkhead replacement project at Cheston Avenue. Today is March 31st, 2021. And the location, I'm sure that most of us already know. That's the small area at the end of the Cheston Avenue. That's the project location. We have, up to this point, we have done field investigations, including a topographic survey, mapping, and utility locating. And we also have done the conceptual design. We considered a couple of alternatives. One is the in-kind bulkhead replacement, and the other one we also consider the living shoreline. We'll go into detail in the next slides. Today is the community meeting, and we'll obtain your feedback. And after that, we will go with the schematic design, including grading plans and final design after that, and the permits. Project requirements are that, of course, the replacement of the existing bulkhead, maintain existing stormwater feature, which is the submerged gravel wetland, which includes the works for the stormwater maintenance work includes the removing sediment, replacing existing soils, and revitalizing the plantings. We also will provide ADA accessible sidewalk to the bulkhead. We will replace the existing guardrail with bollards. We'll provide the gangway and also floating dinghy dock with optional kayak launch. And we'll go into detail in the further slides. Project grant funding. Project is funded by the Department of Natural Resources Waterway Improvement Grant. The grants are for improving border access, boating conditions, and the safety of Maryland's waterways. Funds for this grant are obtained from one-time 5% excise tax paid to the state of Maryland when a boat is purchased. These are pictures of the existing conditions. On the top left, you can see the existing path, the concrete pavers, and on the right to the path is the existing stormwater feature, and you can see failed bulkhead which needs to be replaced. On the bottom is also the same picture of the bulkhead that needs to be replaced. On the bottom left is the existing guardrail that will be replaced with the bollards. And there are a couple of more pictures that shows the overall site conditions. And on top right is the aerial view. The alternative one, which was the bulkhead for the bulkhead replacement, is the in-kind replacement. We'll have the existing bulkhead. If you can see my arrow, that will stay. That will remain. We will construct another bulkhead about 18-inch channelward of the existing bulkhead. And on the left side, if you can see, the left picture shows the ADA path. That's the existing sidewalk. The ADA sidewalk will connect to the existing and will go all the way to near the bulkhead. And from there, we will have the gangway and the floating dinghy dock. And there's optional that we can look at the option of kayak launch next to the dinghy dock. These are some pictures. Of course, these are not exact example, but just for the idea that dinghy dock and the kayak launch and gangway that shows that can be provided on our site, will be provided on our site. These bollards will replace the existing guardrail. On the bottom, you can see those. The alternative two, we consider, was the living shoreline, and these are on the right side it shows the cross section, typical stone sill section, and the left side it shows the footprint of the living shoreline. The living shoreline was not feasible. That's what we found, because we will lose a border access, and it was excessive in cost. It requires a large area of busy waterway, and inability to achieve MDE and the cost planting to stone ratio for living shoreline projects because the water depth, because it was excessive water depth. There are also utility lines. Verizon is next to the project within the waters, and it also requires perpetual and expensive maintenance cost. And due to all these reasons, this option wasn't found feasible. The project schedule is that the design and permitting will be completed by early 2022 and anticipated beginning of construction by summer 2022. So if you have any questions or comments, that you can email to Betsy McCowan by April 14, 2021 at this email address. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Waqar. So yes, write down my email address. It's efmckeown@annapolis.gov. And then Waqar, if you want to stop sharing the presentation so that we can bring everyone on as a panelist and start the question and answer.
And Betsy, we have someone who has joined with the name Tracy, and I don't have a Tracy registered. So you'll need to rename yourself if you are a registered participant in the meeting. And if you didn't pre-register, you won't be admitted.
Amy, would you like to say something?
I'm sorry, I just was able to unmute. I'm Tracy. I'm registered as Teresa. I'm the resident at 12 Cheston Avenue.
But Teresa Cohan?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I'll get you promoted. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have a quick question. The design shows the existing bulkhead is going to be there, and you're building the new bulkhead on the outside of that. Is that what you said?
You're muted, Wakar and Scott.
I just wanted to know the reason for that. Was that just for stability, for not losing the soil, I guess?
Well, I'll go ahead and answer it since they're muted. It's
Okay.
easier to build it that way, Amy, because then you're retaining all of your soil. And you're
Right.
able to put in the new one just right in front of the retained soil.
So in outside of into the water or inside? Inside on the land?
Outside.
Outside, right. Okay. Okay.
Amy, and that is fairly normal construction practices. All the work we did down at the city dock, all of those bulkheads are built outside of the existing bulkhead by 18 inches.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, why don't we get started with more questions? If you want to ask a question, just raise your hand. Or unmute yourself if you've called in. Oh, sorry, David Weimer, did you raise your hand? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Just concerned about the length of timing for this project, given that it's in fairly dilapidated, unsafe sort of conditions. Certainly like for this to be done this year.
Yes, I would too. I echo that sentiment, but our permitting process is extensive, and maybe Scott, since you're familiar with these projects, could you describe how long and why it takes so long to get a project permitted? Wakar and Scott, you are still muted, so can you figure out your audio?
Yeah, I'm showing the telephone line as muted.
Yeah, but it's not muted, like from, I
There we
can't
go, there we
unmute
go,
it.
there we go, okay.
I can't unmute.
Yes. Normally, it takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months to get through the permit process. The city requires a little bit more time just because we have to go through a hearing process. So that adds some time to the entire process. But we're pretty close to being ready to submit for permits as soon as we get the thumbs up from the city on the design and the final approach. We are prepared to present that to the state and the Corps of Engineers and the city.
So we're moving as quickly as we can. The goal is we'll have a complete design package with permits in hand by the end of this year, and then we'll put that out to bid early next year and start construction as soon as we get the contractor on board. Amy, question?
Maybe you could tell us, Scott, how many different permitting agencies are required for this, and why it takes so long, not just the city, so it's all the other agencies.
Yeah, it's the Maryland Department of Environment, Army Corps of Engineers, and the city of Annapolis. This is a pretty standard project, so it's not required to go out on public notice for wetlands license. So that will speed things up considerably. But with COVID and everything, I'm finding our permitting's about 6 to 9 months from beginning to end. The city hearings have kind of been throwing a little bit of a wrench at us lately, just because of normally we would go to a hearing and be voted on that night, but now we're required 30 days and have to come back, address any questions that come up, and then there's another 30-day wait after that. So that adds quite a bit of time to the process. But we can do all submissions at the same time and kind of go through the hearing process while MDE and the Corps of Engineers is reviewing their end of the project.
Teresa Cohen has raised her hand.
Hi, yeah, I was a couple of slides late to the presentation and I was just wondering if there were any gains or losses in impervious surfaces. As you know, you're adding the sidewalk and everything else. Obviously my only concern is for the runoff, whenever it's a really, really heavy rain. Although there's been nothing major, the water can creep up at the base of that road. And I was just wondering if there was any significant loss in impervious surface with the project.
There's a minimal amount of impervious surface added by the sidewalk. However, we are rebuilding and refurbishing the stormwater management feature at the end of the road.
I
So
see.
that should
Okay,
more than offset
great.
any concerns.
Sure. Thank you.
Mhm. Yes, Alderman.
Thank you. Just two questions. You mentioned DNR, a DNR grant. Are there any restrictions or encumbrances that entails with getting that money? I don't know if that's a Beth Bellis question or not.
Yes,
Betsy,
Beth,
I think.
Beth probably can answer it better than me. Beth, do you want to take that one?
I mean, I haven't drilled down on the language, but essentially it's really important for everyone to know that this is for boating access. So as long as, so I could read the particulars to the group, everyone would fall asleep. Essentially a waterway improvement grant for boating access means it has to improve boating access. So that's why we consider so many things, but if it doesn't allow more boats to get to the landing, it's a no for them. And so if we were to change something, I don't know, like, let's say like, okay, we're going to put a patrol boat there or do something different, that would be against the encumbrance. And also if we were to say like, not everyone can come here, like only city residents can come here, that would be against the encumbrance. So the encumbrance basically says it's for recreational transient boats and it has to increase boating access and everyone needs to be able to come. So if I live in Bethesda and I want to launch a kayak there, to be completely transparent, I get to. Because the grants are for everyone to get to the waterway. But other than that, I mean, I could bore you with the details. That's essentially what it says.
Probably why the living shoreline was a deal breaker. But the second question is it going through critical area review with the city of Annapolis, which takes time? Is it in a critical area, I assume?
It is, and we've met
Yeah. Okay.
with Cynthia, and what did she say? Does anyone remember? I think we could do a consistency report. Is that what she told us? But we have been in touch with Cynthia. Scott, do you want to say anything else about that?
As part of a normal review process, the Critical Area Commission does look at all these projects. But normally for something like this, we rarely get any comments, if any, at all.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm seeing a comment on Facebook. I'll just read it to the group. Would the current design for alternative one allow for later installation of habitat features in the water, like a floating wetland or oyster floats, or would those interfere with boater access? Beth, do you want to take a stab at that one? Scott or Wakar?
I can answer that one. I mean, the plan was to be able to also utilize the bulkhead, the face of the bulkhead for people to tie up to if they find necessary, but the dinghy dock is to provide most of the access. A floating garden could certainly be attached to the front of the bulkhead to shield it, not shield it, but enhance the feature, the look of it, that would not be a problem. And outboard of that could even be another floating pier that could run parallel to the bulkhead outboard of the floating garden.
So it sounds like the answer is yes. And right now we're mostly, there's echo from someone, maybe Wakar, I think it might be you. Mostly addressing the critical need to replace the failing bulkhead. Any other questions?
Mr. Friend, you're muted.
I have a question. Oh,
Let's see if we can get Bob. Okay, there you.
Hi.
Hi.
No, there was not a question. We just were talking amongst ourselves
Right.
and raised the hand.
Okay.
But I do have a question as we're thinking about that I wrote down. Are we going to get copies of the slide presentation?
Yes, I can send those out.
That would be appreciated.
Okay, Amy, your question?
In the refurbishment of the BMP there, you said you were going to replace the soils and revitalize the plantings. I mean, I know there's a lot of weeds in there because I've replanted and weeded there many times. So does that mean you're replacing all the plantings? And what about on the berm of the BMP there, which is pretty weedy right now, but does have a lot of echinacea and grasses and stuff up there?
Yeah, that. Okay, let me.
We'll get a bit of echo.
Yeah, that's the plan, that we will revitalize the entire submerged grab wetland, including the berms and cleanup in the soils, of course, and the new plantings.
And Amy, once we get to 65% design, I can speak with you about the plan and see if you're okay with it. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Friend, question?
Yes. Can you tell me how it's going to be maintained after this is done?
We've lived on the street for 38 years and there have been many attempts to plant and do things down there and they've lasted about 6 months. I mean, other than what Amy's done, which has been by far the most valuable. But if there's no maintenance.
Is that part of the grant too, to
Yes.
maintain it?
Yes, that's.
It is not part of the grant, but it will be part of a stormwater BMP management contract that we are about a year out from developing an RFP for. So because we have other stormwater management maintenance needs around the city that we have to address. So that will become part of that maintenance work.
Great.
Okay, funded
Thank you.
differently.
Can I just add to that? And Betsy and I have met and looked at a bunch of the projects that the Conservancy put in and talked about the maintenance. So this is the first time ever in all these years that the city is going to be having this, beginning this maintenance program, which is very exciting for us, especially.
Great. Yeah, all of us.
Yeah.
One other question. The pictures that were shown of the floating dock didn't seem to be contextually within the city of Annapolis. They look modern. Are those just facsimile, or how do you intend to build those, or what options are there? The bullards, for instance, I thought are terrific. in terms of that end, but as you get into the water end, they look frankly modern.
We haven't come up with a final design for the floating docks. That was just put in as a kind of show people what we had in mind, but I was on a project just separate from this one for Lafayette Park, and we just put a floating dinghy dock there. So it would be looked at in different ways, probably something similar to that, just a different shape with a gangway leading to it.
mean, I would-
Will we be able to see that before final approval, or once these steps are done after April 14th, will we not be a participant in the selection of that?
Yes, you'll be able to see all this before we ever submit.
Thank you.
Great.
I would also add that I spoke with our grantors that are funding this entire project, and they would like this pier. We're going to need to put this pier to be perpendicular to the bulkhead. So it's possible that the pier in the conceptual picture is parallel. That does not allow for the greatest amount of boater access. So our pier will be perpendicular if DNR has any say so, and since they fund it, they could probably have some say so.
And similarly on the as you get further along into the drawing of the entire bulkhead, and specifically the drainage, obviously it serves a huge drainage function there. I know that, but the visibility of the current stormwater kind of dwarfs the plantings that Amy's done and the overall appearance of the pier. Is that going to be able to be muted and merged into the subsurface in a way that's not so readily apparent with a huge stormwater drain sitting about 2 feet above ground? That would be something I would look very favorably at trying to incorporate into the planning of it.
So let me see if I can summarize your concern. You're talking about the potentially trying to hide the overall visual impact of the gray infrastructure components of the storm drainage down there. Is that
Yeah, or to minimize. Or to minimize it. I mean, it obviously serves a valuable function in terms of where it's located at the bottom of the hill, right at Spa Creek. But it's kind of what you see now, right, front and center.
Well, maybe we can look at that and get creative with the plantings. And so maybe we could try and, maybe it's a shrub that can help hide it. But I think, we have to be mindful if we're talking about major infrastructure changes. It could be a big cost impact to the project. So we'll take that into consideration as we move forward through design. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, Dave Donahauer. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, thank you. First of all, wonderful presentation. Thanks for including the neighborhood here. And as a neighbor to that piece of land, many of us have tried to shore up that bulkhead for decades with plywood from Home Depot and topsoil and grass and other things before Spa Creek Conservancy did their work, which I would applaud. I think the work they did is fine. So I fully support the bulkhead. I've unfortunately seen some dogs and some kids fall into one of those holes that you showed in the early slide. So my question is about the floating dock, since it appears that the grant is calling for maximum boater access. And even to the extent that thank you, I think it was Beth, pointed out that whatever floating dock occurs down there will be perpendicular to the bulkhead, not parallel to it. and perpendicular very specifically for one reason, to maximize the number of boats that could or could not be launched there. So my question is, what consideration has been made to the maximum number of cars that may be required to park on the street?
So I'll start, Betsy. So it has nothing to do with launching boats. It has to do with big boats anchoring out and their dinghies coming in. So in my mind, that has very little to do with any cars coming in. That would be a conversation we could have about a kayak launch. But in terms of a perpendicular dinghy dock, that is only for dinghies coming in from boats that are moored or anchored out, and not any launching, because there's no launching facility there.
You're still muted, David Donahauer, if you want to.
No,
and I believe
just fair answer. I think we have to anticipate that the traffic's going to go both ways, but I see your point.
Okay.
I mean, I think it would be either Uber or foot traffic leaving, and we're not talking about a gigantic floating dock. We're talking about a floating dock that, in my mind, would accommodate 4 or 5 dinghies. I mean, 8 on boat show weekend, the busiest weekend. So we're just, for me, and Tyler, I would encourage you to weigh in because you've been there longer than me. I really only think this is very minimal foot traffic and possibly an Uber pickup. I don't perceive any vehicle traffic in this situation.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think you're going to get the dinghy traffic, but you're also going to get better access to the water taxi as well.
Yeah.
Just as a follow-up, if there are going to be people launching their kayaks and coming from Bethesda, for instance, they're going to have a car, and there are parking restrictions on the street right now, and I'm just wondering just to follow up with Dave, and I'm not talking about people who come in from their boats, because that happens all the time right now, actually, and they just tie up at the end, and it's wonderful. Particularly during boat show, we have a lot of people, they leave their bikes down there, they lock them up, they go to walk in, bike into town. I'm talking about the people that, as you say, this is the state of Maryland. And if they're coming with their kayaks and their pedal boards from far away, where are they going to park their car?
So this is like a separate conversation, I feel like, Betsy. So a floating dock, for me, has nothing to do with the kayak launch in terms of traffic and concerns for the residents. So do we want to talk about that now, or do we want to set that time aside?
Well, I think we have time to talk about it now. It's only 6:35. Should we present that? We wanted to present that as an option for discussion because it's come up, but we wanted to see what people thought about it before we move any further with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, and what I would say is, as a whole, the city of Annapolis has been very vocal about having more access to the water. And so we've looked for spots with a kayak launch. But what we are seeing, what I am seeing as a harbor master, is that most neighborhoods are saying, no, thank you. We don't want it in our neighborhood. And that's fine. That's that's a concern because I understand the parking concerns. But if that is the decision this neighborhood makes, or Ward 1 or the city of Annapolis makes as a whole, then we have to look at a different place for kayak launches because there aren't a whole lot of places for that to happen. And so, yeah, I think in my mind, the only people coming from Bethesda, which I don't really think that would happen. I mean, I think that's a pretty unknown locale right there. I don't think people from Bethesda will be coming. I think it will still be local people to come to Cheston Avenue. But for sure, if the neighborhood doesn't want it, we want to hear that. That's what we want to hear today.
And I want to make it clear that I welcome, we have people crabbing from Clay Street, frankly, in our neighborhood. We love it. It's who we are. We've lived here for 38 years and I mean it. But I just don't suddenly want to all of a sudden be the area where we bring in, everybody can come in and have discovered this and we can't park in front of our house anymore, frankly. I welcome. That's Annapolis to me, is our neighborhood. We have neighbors that walk their kayak down all the time and put it in. I just really feel like I have to speak up about making sure that we consider the neighborhood and that we can still live here as we have for so many years.
Yes.
Especially since there are no restrictions basically on the
On the
weekend.
weekends, on the weekdays, we have, parking, power parking. But on the weekends, when most people are going to bring their kayaks, this could turn into a real, and hopefully it won't. Hopefully it will be just a construction and everybody in town can bring their kayaks and put them in there. And I cannot tell you how much we embrace that here. My concern is if all of a sudden we're going to, everybody in Severna Park can figure out they can put their kayak in here and then we can't park on our own street. So I just think we need to be really aware of that.
Well, I'm not muted.
Okay, sorry. Let's hold on.
Sure.
Alderwoman Tierney, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to refresh my memory. Are you in a residential parking district?
Yes, we're in number 3.
Okay, you're in number 3. I think to Beth's point, though, I don't think the city is going to label this as a launching facility. Am I correct, Beth? Am I correct? I mean, it won't be listed as a launching facility like Truxton.
We can do whatever we want. If we don't want to put it on a website, then we won't put it on a website.
Okay, well
it doesn't mean that someone couldn't come from Severna Park, but they wouldn't know about it. It's not going to be published in a launching brochure. It's not going to be in the port book. It just means that, in my mind, it's going to be entirely people in the neighborhood. Now, is someone in the neighborhood?
That's awesome. I love that. That's how we've lived here, honestly.
And of course, someone could tell their friend that lives in Severna Park or Bethesda, hey, there's a place to launch. I don't think that's going to happen very often.
No, and that happens sometimes, and that's fine. Yes. So I just want to be cautious about, and wanted to hear the response, and I'm real pleased with the response. So.
Yeah, and thank you so much for your input. We'll definitely take this into consideration as we talk about this more. So thank you.
Okay.
And Teresa Cohen, you wanted to say something? If you want to unmute yourself, Ms. Cohen. Okay.
I'm here. I do agree with Chris and Bob. We don't want a lot of people coming, but I think that this is two different issues. The first thing is we do have parking restrictions, and we have parking restrictions, and the placement of a kayak dock does not negate the restrictions. One, they're not mutually exclusive. What we need is to enforce the parking restrictions, not provide access to the dock. We have to have people follow the restrictions that are in place. They aren't enforced that much. We do have parking limits. I don't know that I've ever seen anybody get a ticket or their car moved. We have people fishing down there for hours on end. We've even had people camping. And so the issue of enforcing parking violations is not, in my mind, related to providing recreational access to the neighborhood. There are a lot of people who, myself included, and Chris and Bob know very well, we were the ones who put our man-made floating dock in there. And we didn't know, we thought we were being helpful, but obviously there's opinions about it we weren't aware of. So I think that providing the kayak dock does not necessarily, just because somebody has a kayak dock does not mean it's going to be related to an automobile. we're making a lot of assumptions about traffic and borrowing trouble, about potential this and potential that. And these things are not related necessarily. A kayak dock doesn't necessarily mean we're going to have a lot of people launching. Suppose it's people in the neighborhood like myself who want to use it. I don't bring a car. I parked here. Or other people who may drop off and leave, which was the case in multiple times that I've seen the people use it. Or people come and kayak over, they pull their kayak up and then they walked. So I don't think kayak means automobile. And I don't think we should remove the option of additional recreational access to, we have a very large group, the SUP group in Annapolis. It's a growing group and a lot of people belong to it. And I don't think we should keep the Cheston side of people who want to participate with that without being able to launch their boards. And these are people who live here who, you know, they're just carrying their boards down and want to get in. So I think just to reiterate, I think when consideration is made in what access is put in down there, we should not automatically make assumptions that for every recreant, it's going to be tied to an automobile. I don't believe that is a reasonable assumption.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Mr. Gale?
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. I've lived on Cheston Avenue for a few years now, and there are certainly a number of boats that are anchored out there, and there are certainly, to get access to them, I know of one person who does come down and launches a dinghy or two off the dock, and I believe, and more than one. And so you're back into the car situation there. And as obviously, if you're doing anything of people bringing more than just a board down that they can lug from a block away, most people are going to drive a car in order to get
Park down here.
park down here in order to get their boat or their kayak or whatever. Second part of that, my question would be that, are you planning on people leaving their dinghies, kayaks, or whatever on the floating dock or tied to the bulkhead?
Beth, do you want to, Beth or Tyler, can you answer that? I'm not sure what the operations would look like.
I can. So Title 15 is not going to change. You're not able, if you don't have a mooring buoy, you're not able to leave any craft for more than 2 consecutive nights or 10 total nights per calendar year. So that's not going to change. So I think, Betsy, from the conversation that I'm hearing, we need to get a handle on just Ward 1 or the city of Annapolis. I don't know what we're polling. Do they largely not want a kayak launch, or do they largely not want a kayak launch? And maybe Alderwoman Tierney could speak to that.
Well, I think you have to be very cognizant of the present, I guess, need right now for water access. And I would say you'd want to open it for kayak access. But I think the fine line is when you advertise it or list it, as I said, as a launch facility, then you're opening it up to a lot of traffic potentially. So,
I mean, I don't think we want to do that, but I will say that it is very likely that it would be unconstitutional to say that only Annapolis city residents can use this.
and it would backfire humongous. Yeah, that's not good.
So you don't need to advertise that it's open.
Yeah.
But if the citizen said, hey, we want a kayak launch and we want a kayak rack, that's fine. And in my mind, it is very unlikely that anyone would use it outside of the city of Annapolis. Because I'm going to go to Sandy Point. I'm going to go to these bigger launches. But if the citizens are way too nervous and they don't want the launch and they don't want the racks, that's what we need to know right now. But knowing that, that means that, you know, the folks that are unhappy about the lack of water access for everyone We have to find other spots, and almost everyone is saying, not in my neighborhood. And that's fine. I get it. But we'll have to find some spots. And maybe this is not the spot, because maybe this is sort of a neighborhood spot.
That's what I would say.
Can you join me? I don't, I hope I haven't made it. We've had people come and go on our street all the time and welcomed it. There are no parking restrictions on the weekends.
That's the problem.
They are only
That's
Monday
the
through
problem.
Friday. And I love the way we have lived here for 38 years, and I'm sure Ham would say the same thing, Hamilton Gale. But as soon as you say we're not going to advertise it as a launch, I don't see how you can have a launch on the end of a street. We're not a park, we're a street where people live. You can't have a public launch here, I wouldn't think. And I welcome anybody to put in their kayak, to put in their boards, to put in, like I said, we have done this for years here. We just have to be careful now. And if we are going to do it, then we're going to probably have to add some parking restrictions on weekends, or the whole neighborhood will be, overtaken.
So I don't know if we need to do a poll, Betsy, but what I'm hearing is nobody wants a kayak launch.
Well,
No, that's
that's
not
what
true.
I'm trying not
That's
to
not what
say
she's
at
saying.
all. I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to say that at all. That's what I'm trying to make clear. I don't, but I don't know, maybe somebody else could.
I think that once we understand what the final design and in creating access, what we don't want is a kayak club all of a sudden launching from the end of Cheston Avenue
and parking there.
Where they go ahead and they bring in 8 boats and then park a van with a trailer
right
down the street, and they're gone all day.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to avoid.
Yeah.
We love the fact that people come down the street from the area and roll kayaks in. And they are there, but if it becomes a launch site for the entire city and for kayak clubs, then it's going to be a problem. And once the chickens get out of the coop, we have a problem.
Right.
So we're trying to address it now and hearing it.
Right.
And
it's not the kayak launch, it's the parking. That's what people are trying to say. It's the activity with the parking. Whether or not someone launches their kayak is not the issue.
Which they do.
It's what are we going to do to limit the infiltration of the parking and a lot of activity that just sort of perches themselves. And we're already a congested area. There's been time, I mean, Bob and I are neighbors, and there's times when they have to inch their cars in, on the street, and we live here. And so it's really not whether or not somebody's going to pull up a boat or launch a kayak. It's what is going to be done if for some reason this is a public access. And it doesn't even matter about launching kayaks. What about the people who are parking their cars here and sitting down there and fishing for hours on end? The kayak is actually a moot point. It's the foot traffic. I mean, it's the automobile and parking traffic that comes along with public access that in this little congested street is problematic. How are we going to enforce parking restrictions? That has to be looked at when you give public access to this street. You can't do one without the other.
Okay, thank you.
Can I say something?
Well, Alderwoman Tierney had her hand up first.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want you to know that we don't have to change the entire zone 3 for parking. We can put up signs specific to that area saying no parking on weekends. We can go before the transportation board, make that recommendation. Question is, do you think would that work, having signs saying no parking, and then we'll enforce, what it takes with enforcing is if you do sort of a, initial enforcement, people get the message very quickly. I mean, I think that's manageable. It's a solution. If you can consider that as you're making your decision on whether or not you want the kayaks.
Yeah, I mean, if
Because
people get ticketed, it'll help. I mean, that's certainly better than, no restriction at all.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that you have to look at, if you go over to Truxton Park and you see how boats have been launched, even kayaks and trailers, where are they parking those vehicles while they're utilizing the water? And it's generally over in that area where there isn't a limitation of parking. They don't have the same challenges that we have. So I don't want to chase them from Cheston Avenue, and all of a sudden they're parking on Southgate that is causing concern over there as well, and parking in front of Amy's house.
Right.
Just because we were able to do it. Look, it's a difficult situation because I don't think anybody that I know of with this call doesn't want people to utilize the fantastic waters that we have. But at the same time, we don't want to create a problem for already non-existent parking here in Annapolis.
So we absolutely hear you that that we need to address the parking enforcement before we continue to investigate the kayak launch. So we will, as a city, we will work on that. Amy, what did you want? Amy, what did you want?
I wanted to make sure that everybody, just to bring a little bit of clarity here, almost all of our streets have floating docks at the end. Southgate has a floating dock where we launch our kayaks and paddle boards, and lots of people come down and launch their boats and paddle boards. Many of the streets have floating docks, and I don't think that it has been a problem. It's not that people, I mean, maybe people drive and park on Southgate and launch their docks. It's not that easy to launch a kayak and off of a floating dock. I've done it many times, and it's really not a lot of fun. It's much easier to go to Amos Garrett Park or to go to Truxton Park. So I think people, unless they're close by, I think it's kind of, I hear your concerns, but I think it's a little bit of a non-issue because there's other places to go which are way easier to launch. It's not going to be easy to take a kayak down that gangplank and then put it down there, and that's just not an easy thing to do. So
we trust your judgment.
Well, I just know because I've launched them off of floating docks, and it's just not a lot of fun. That's what we do, but it's not fun.
But to be clear, we're putting in a kayak launch. We're talking about putting in a kayak launch, which would actually make it super easy.
No, I don't think, well, I don't, okay. I didn't hear that it was going to be a kayak launch there. So I thought just a floating dock is going to be there with a gangplank.
So we're talking about whether or not to put in the kayak launch, which would make it super easy to launch a kayak. And I feel like there's a lot of folks that are concerned about that.
Is that Beth?
No, I don't think that they're concerned about launching a kayak. They're concerned about the traffic, the potential traffic for people who would bring kayaks and not move their cars. They're concerned about congestion in parking, not recreating. There's a big difference.
No, I understand what you're saying, but it's one and the same when we're deciding whether or not to put in a kayak launch.
Is the kayak launch
don't
part
agree.
of is the kayak launch part of the design right now? The
It's
design that we just
it's
saw?
optional.
It's an option. So they haven't even seen it yet. So
We showed them a conceptual of that, and maybe a car can put that back up.
I didn't see the launch.
It was, we showed a photo.
The car showed a conceptual.
I saw a float and a ramp. I didn't see anything more than that.
Right.
I thought I saw a kayak launch. The little flat white launch.
These are this is just an example.
On the right.
Well, that's not what it's going to look like, though. Yeah. Right.
Just an example.
So where's your drawing that?
That's the kayak.
How do they get the kayak down there?
Right. where would you put it here?
Next to this.
Yeah, where would it go?
Next to the floating
Yeah, it
dock.
would go down the gangplank, the walkway down to the floating dock. It's just not a, not
Yeah,
that
good.
easy.
Yeah, that is not going to be an easy feat for somebody to carry their kayak down there anyway. Yeah.
Right,
Well,
right.
and my concern is none of that has been finalized. So
Yeah.
I'm hearing some conflicting things.
Right.
That is saying, oh, yes, there is a launch for a kayak. And
Okay,
I mean, somebody needs to graphically present that so that we can make a judge. I don't see in any of these pictures, would it be easy for someone to launch anything
Right.
without tripping and falling overboard and hitting their head and suing the city?
okay, we're just at concept design right now. So right now you're looking at our concepts, and we wanted to discuss the option of a kayak launch within our concept. So right now it's just optional. We wanted to hear the community's feedback on this. And this
Okay,
is a
so they don't
wonderful-
have to make a decision in the immediate future. It sounded like it was imminent to make a decision. So can you tell the residents the next time they'll be able to see an update on the plan? So with the kayak launch, so they can.
Right, so we'll have to regroup after this, and I think we need to discuss as a city more of a citywide approach to these kayak launches. I would like to better understand where our priority locations are, and Beth, I'm just making this up as I go. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we need to regroup as a city and figure out if this is a spot that we want to move forward with, if this is the spot that makes the most sense. If we're feeling as a city like we want to move forward with this, then let's take a look at the parking and the concerns that we're hearing from the group today. That's how I would like to approach it. And then perhaps we could regroup with the community after we regrouped internally. Does that sound good, everyone?
Are you speaking specifically of the kayak launch discussion? Is it when you say the city internally, or is it the whole project? You confused me, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I haven't heard any other major concerns on the project overall. I think it's specifically the kayak launch. But I will say it's easy to talk about this as we move forward, and we can progress through design, because well, it might change the floating dock location. So what Cara and Scott, in terms of our design process, when do we need to know if we're going to put in the kayak launch?
When we submit for permits.
Like Dale's truck or somebody.
And when are we planning to do that?
As soon as you give us the go ahead.
Okay, so this is a critical decision piece. So we need to decide this pretty soon if we want to keep this project moving forward. So we will need to regroup internally to figure out if we want to move forward with it. And then we will regroup with the community accordingly.
Can I bring up one other point?
Yes.
When you make that accessible to all the boats out here so they can bring their launches in, they all have garbage. And what's going to happen at the end of the street when the garbage thing is overflowed?
Mm-hmm.
There's no can, but I mean, are they going to
There is no trash can there, is there?
right, but are they going to do something like that? And is that going to get maintained? I'm just concerned that if everyone's going to come down there and they're going to have stuff with them, where are they going to put their trash and
Well,
stuff?
like the fishermen and everybody else for that matter.
Yeah.
That's already using it.
Okay.
I mean, that's another issue, because somebody has to maintain it and pick it up.
Right. I think that's the bigger question, is if you put in a trash can, who takes care of it. So I'll look into that.
Okay.
Thank you.
And what I would say to that is in my 5 years that I've been here, the only time we've ever had some real complaints about trash is when we had a multitude of anchored liveaboards that were putting trash in the trash can.
Right.
And we had to start trash pickup every day. But with the appropriate amount of enforcement, all of those people are gone. So given that we don't expect to have a multitude, meaning 8, 10, 12 anchored liveaboards, because they're mostly illegal. If you actually do the proper enforcement, I don't foresee a trash problem like what we had when I first came on.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Before you go, can I just ask a quick question? What's the proposed width of that ramp that leads to the floating dock?
Scott and Wakar.
No.
4 feet.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other comments or questions?
Betsy, you've got 4 people who have raised their hands. Can you see them in the panelists? Shanika Henson, Rob Schnabel, and Juliet Birch.
Okay. Sorry. So let's go. Delegate Shanika Hansen, can you unmute yourself?
Hi, I apologize. I'm on my mobile device. I really appreciated hearing the discussion tonight and getting to understand everybody's concerns and everybody's expectations and what particular parts of the project everybody's looking forward to and the work they've done to maintain it thus far. I just wanted to, I would say as well that we fight, really hard at the state levels for the DNR funding and to really elevate and make sure that this district is a priority when it comes to projects like this. And for that reason, we're anticipating a few other projects. And just to add a little perspective in the conversation too, the Robert Eads Park, which was formerly Adams Park, which is, it's a neighbor, it's down the street. They're looking at adding some additional opportunities for paddle boarding, for kayaking, for different launch sites there as well, and to really do a number of things to revitalize that location there too. The conversation on advertising or not advertising to the degree that it would be open to the public. I know that if there are, we would want to make sure that we had some level of parity with the parks. We have to take into consideration the different ability for people who are guests that have to travel there by car to be able to follow the parking rules and restrictions that exist in the two communities. But I do know that with them being so close and then the kind of concepts for them being similar, that we would want to make sure that going forward on the city level that we could kind of justify if we were making decisions about one or the other, that we were doing so, making sure that there were ways that the two of them had some parity or similarities there. But again, it's always a joy to represent this district and to be able to fight for funding for it, and then to see communities come together and kind of take that to the next level and say what that funding would look like and how it could be used. So I have appreciated the opportunity to listen in and participate in the conversation tonight.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful. Thank you, Delegate Hanson. Okay, I think the next hand was Rob.
Unmuting. Yeah, thank you. In terms of things that have already been discussed, I'm all for, a real kayak ramp would be wonderful. And obviously the more people that use it, I think the better. I've never had an issue at Acton Place or the hospital site in terms of access there. And that's how I access kayaking. One thing that I don't know if it was brought up earlier, I was a little late to the meeting, but it would be wonderful if the city could make this more of a living shoreline. I know that it has, a little bit of water depth to it, but we've done plenty of living shoreline projects, even where you've got great depth, St. John's College is an example. St. Mary's High School is getting ready to do a living shoreline on their bulkhead and its deeper waters. But right now, the way you have that kayak ramp, if that's part of the design, that's a pretty steep slope walking down a ramp like that. And if you, would come halfway up with the ground level and create a nice tidal wetland along the edge there, that would make that ramp less steep. And as we keep doing bulkheads in front of one another every 10 or 20 years or 30 years, we keep losing all of our great shallow water habitat, which is kind of, some of the filtering mechanism and great for wildlife habitat. So I'd love to see, a living shoreline project. It looks like on Cheston, looks like the neighbors that are right along, I'm just looking at an aerial photograph on my phone, looks like there's a living shoreline right around the corner there. And so it'd be great if the city would lead, kind of lead by example on these living shoreline projects.
Yes, I can start with talking about the living shoreline. We looked into the living shoreline because of the depths we had a big challenge in terms of how far out the living shoreline would have to extend into an already very busy waterway. We also had a big challenge with that it's a little bit contradictory to the objective of the grant that we're using for this project, because the grant has to be used for improving boater access. Wakar, do you want to quickly pull up that slide and I'll continue talking? Because we did look into it. And the other, Beth, did you want to mention your conversation with Bhaskar today?
I mean, yes, I'm happy to expand on that. So essentially there's 3 reasons that the living shoreline doesn't work at Cheston Avenue. The first is it won't be grant funded, like not whatsoever. So it actually decreases boater access. So we won't get a penny for it. And the city doesn't have any money whatsoever to do this project. The second reason is it actually like decreases the width of Spot Creek for boats to move around. And the third is it's absolutely cost prohibitive, even when compared to the current plan project, even like grant funding aside. So we looked at it, we tried, we wanted to do it. It wasn't even possible. So that's the bad news. The good news is we're looking for a living shoreline at Lafayette Avenue. So we're really pleased that DNR actually told me this morning that Lafayette is a perfect spot for that. And so we're planning on doing a really nice living shoreline at Lafayette. So that's the good news. And so for Cheston, as far as I can tell, the only option in terms of money, boater access, and many other reasons, it needs to be a replacement in kind.
Okay, well, just so you know, I mean, a lot of the projects that have been done in the city, and I've helped design them and put them in the ground, you can always find one of the variables of a way out for living shoreline, and water depth shouldn't be a limiting factor. We did a project over in Back Creek that there's plenty of, along 700 feet of shoreline at the Parkwood Association, and there's plenty, we worked around the boat access there and actually have the shape of the stone sills there are in a way a U shape that you're able to have the dock tie in and people can still use boat access. And again, it'd be great if the city would really lead by example. It's possible. There is grant money there. I apply for grant money. I do it all the time. And this is, you hate to lose, this is actually a perfect site. It's south facing, which is ideal for the tidal wetland plants that you'd actually put along there.
I'm happy to speak with you offline about this, but that is not what we have discovered. And we have looked at this in depth. Like this has not been a cursory examination. This has been an in-depth study. So I'm happy to speak with you offline about this, but
that sounds great. I work with this state and everybody all the time, so I'm very familiar with this stuff, but I'd be happy to talk offline, Beth. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to participate in that as well. Okay, thank you, Rob. I believe, Wakar, can you stop sharing? Because it's hard for me to see everyone. I believe the next hand was Juliet Birch.
Yeah, just going back to the kayak launch for a minute. I'm just wondering, is the kayak launch idea of accompanying that with the floating dock, is that new, or are there other neighborhoods that have both that might be comparables that could provide, us with an idea of how it might affect our neighborhood? So the concerns that people have are certainly warranted, but on the other hand, a kayak launch would be a cool thing to have.
Beth, do you know?
Yeah, I can answer that. So the idea of kayak launches is fairly new. The Tucker Street group in West Annapolis has opted to prefer to have the kayak launch and the kayak racks. We are working on 8. We are working on 8 waterfront improvements at the moment, but Cheston is really only our second one that we've progressed this far. So essentially, it's a bit new. It's a bit new, and I understand that there are some communities that are going to say, no, I don't want that.
So we don't really have a whole lot of experience yet to see how it changes other people coming into the neighborhood or traffic or all of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mark, are there any other hands that are raised?
Nope, all the hands are down.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Parting thoughts?
Betsy,
Grievances.
nice job. We really appreciate what you've done with your team. Are you going to send out another email that basically defines the schedule of events going forth?
Yes, I will.
That would be appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
Great.
And-
Well, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you all very much for your hard work, and our apologies to the harbor master in the town for illegally putting in the dock, but it's gone now. We did remove it.
It looked very nice. Thank you.
My husband really worked hard on it, I'll tell you.
That's okay. Beth has seen everything.
Yeah, we felt terrible about it. We really did. We meant well. So we really appreciate that you were very kind about it. And we appreciate, Bob, you being the go-between when we were out of town. So, you know, we're all trying to do the right thing for the neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, everybody. And
second
you'll be hearing more from us. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.